neighbor would go on and sputter, where are the sacrifices made to appease your gods? And the Christians would have responded that they didn't make sacrifices anymore. They would have responded by saying that Jesus was the temple to end all temples. Jesus was the priest to end all priests. Jesus was the sacrifice to end all sacrifices. And no one had ever heard a message like this in the history of humanity. And so the Romans called the early Christians atheists. The early Christians were called atheists because what the Christians were saying about spiritual reality was so unique it couldn't be classified with any of the other existing world religions. And this parable in Luke 15 explains why they were absolutely right to call them, us, atheists. Let's not miss the irony of this, standing as we do in the midst of the culture wars of our day. And you can see this played out especially south of the border, can't you? I think us Canadians, we would just rather, if an argument gets too heated, we would just rather pat each other on the shoulder and grab a Molson Canadian, right? Watch the hockey game. But you see the culture wars in the States, in the elections, and the Republican and Democrat, and the right and the left, and it just goes on and on and on. But it's ironic, because most people in our culture, most people here in Cambridge, would identify Christianity as religion and as moralism. Christianity is religion and it's moralism. And the only alternative, they would say, besides going into some other world religion, would be pluralistic secularism. But from the beginning, it was not so. It was not so at the beginning. Christianity was recognized as a tertium quid, a third way, a new reality that they just couldn't categorize the way they did with other world religions. And the critical point here is this, that in general, religiously observant people were offended by Jesus, but those on bad terms with religious institutions, those on bad terms with moralistic types, they were attracted and interested in Jesus. And that's evident in Luke 15. It's evident in each of the four Gospels, in Matthew, in Mark, in Luke, and in John. In every case where Jesus meets a religious person and someone the religious system had labeled sinner or outcast, the outcast is the one who connects and draws close to Jesus, and the religious person walks away in a huff. And I'll give you some examples. In John 3 and 4, Jesus first meets a religious person, and then he meets a racial outcast. And after their encounter, the religious person withdraws to the shadows. And we don't hear from this religious person for a very long time. But the racial outcast not only accepts Jesus as her Savior, but she introduces many in her community to Jesus, and many become Christians because of her. Next example. Luke chapter 7, verses 36 to 50. Jesus is having dinner here with a prominent religious leader in the community, a Pharisee. And halfway through their dinner, picture this, they're reclining, right? And halfway through their dinner, a prostitute comes in, crashes the meal, and takes out a container of expensive perfume and begins to anoint Jesus' feet. And this religious leader is indignant, like someone in the hallway there. Begins to get incensed that this woman would have the audacity to bring her uncleanness into his house and interrupt his meal with this important person, Jesus. And Jesus not only sets up this woman's actions as an example for the others to follow, but he offers her forgiveness. One last example. One of my favorite chapters in the Bible. Luke chapter 19. And here you've got a whole bunch of religious types, and you've got a political outcast. Any guess as to who mutters and who draws close to Jesus? You got it. The religious leaders mutter, and the political outcast draws close to Jesus, invites him to his home, and the two have fellowship together. Small wonder then that during one of his talks, Jesus announced to the respectable religious leaders, listen, crooks and whores are going to precede you in God's kingdom. John the Baptist, who was Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist came to you showing you the right road, the road leading to belief in me, and you turned up your noses at him. But the crooks and whores believed in him. And even when you saw their changed lives, you still didn't care enough to change yourselves and believe the prophet. Fact, Jesus' teaching consistently attracted the irreligious while offending the Bible-believing religious people of his day. And when I reflect on this, and I'm coming to my point here, when I reflect on this, the only question I can ask is this: what happened? What happened? How come the teaching in most churches today has the exact opposite effect? It drives irreligious younger brother types away, and sometimes makes the elder brother types feel even more self-righteous and justified in their actions and ideas. You see, the kind of outsiders that Jesus attracted aren't attracted to today's churches, even the ones that we might label as contemporary or cutting edge. Most churches today attract conservative, buttoned up, moralistic people. I mean, how else do you think that the creative minds behind the most popular TV cartoon series of all time came up with the character Ned Flanders? How else? And this can mean only one thing. If the preaching of our ministers and the practice of our parishioners do not have the same effect on people that Jesus had, then we must not be declaring the message Jesus did. If our churches aren't appealing to younger brothers, they must be more full of elder brothers than we'd like to think. Our motto at River City Church is "Churches Changed." And there's a reason for that. We want to change people's image of what church is, one person at a time. And the way that we're going to do that is not by constantly changing to be on the cutting edge and to be the hippest, coolest church in town, as nice as that might be. That's not what it's about. The way that we're going to do that is by going back to Jesus, who is the true head of the church. Jesus is the true head of River City Church. We're going to go back to Jesus for inspiration and for guidance. We're going to interact with people the way that Jesus interacted with people. We're going to proclaim the gospel as Jesus proclaimed the gospel. And in like manner to Jesus, if anyone's going to be offended at River City Church, it will be the elder brother types. It will be the religious elder brother types. Because this community, Cambridge, the Tri-Cities, needs a church that reconverted Christ followers can bring their loved ones who aren't into church. I have friends in this community who aren't into church, and they don't know what a close relationship with Jesus is about. And part of the reason is because they hear that the only way to get that is by going to church, and they know they don't want to go there. Do you think that I want to invite them to a church where they're going to feel unwelcomed, underappreciated, or unloved? I mean, what kind of friend would I be if I knowingly brought my friends to a place where they'd feel judged or looked down upon? I would be no friend at all. I would be a total and complete jerk.